Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the best show of the best shows, where we talk about everything from comic books to even social commentary. This is episode number
7
of For Canon's Sake. So whether you're a normie, a wannabe expert, or a tryhard, get in there. And now, for your host, Mr. Eric July.
Appreciate that. We are back. Episode 7 of For Canon's Sake. Remember, no matter where you're listening to this, certainly if you're on my website, you can listen to this anywhere else. We're live on basically all major digital platforms. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it, Stitcher. We're on there, so be sure to check it out there as well. And of course, live on my YouTube over at youtube.com/YoungRipper59. But just to get more information, you can head over to forcanonsake.com as well as ericdjuly.com. Today, we're going to speak on something that I may end up doing a video about actually later. It's going to be centered around DC versus Marvel in terms of the actual comics. Also going to give you what I expect from a comic book, what's important, at least to me, in terms of books, what makes a good comic a good comic. We'll speak on that as well. And then we are, of course, going to talk about my pull list for the week. It's not as deep as it was last week, but it is pretty up there. And we'll discuss some of what's going on there. But of course, let's get into it. DC versus Marvel. Now, let me set the scene here. I'm not one of those guys that feels like I have to pit the other against the other. Now, for the sake of my conversation, which I'll explain a little later, I think the compare and contrast is relevant. But I don't pit one against the other just to do it. Though there are many people that do this, certainly with the rise of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and movies, which most people will say Marvel is doing the better job. And I think this is, I don't know, for whatever reason, people feel like they have to take sides. I'm not one of those, but people feel like they have to take sides. Which turns in, it just makes for this really dishonest sort of conversation. And by that, I mean that it gets difficult to decide what is good and what is not, because most people aren't viewing it objectively, because they feel like they have to pit one against the other, if that makes any sense. But I'm not one of those guys that does that. I'm not being paid by DC. I'm not being paid by Marvel or any of these guys. So I don't have any sort of stake in the game in that regard, right? I'm just a comic book fan, a fan of comics. So I'm not one of those guys that has to go around pitting one against the other just for the sake of doing it. I won't just defend one just to be defending it, and I certainly won't over criticize or be overly critical, inconsistently critical of one of the major companies over the other. I just don't do that. And I think it's weird that a lot of people do. I really do. A lot of people do this, and it's weird. You got these fanboys on both of these different sides, and I think the Marvel ones, at least in my honest opinion, are a little more loud, and I think that's because of the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They don't want anything to threaten that, so they feel like they have to criticize the other one, just really, really nitpicky things that they certainly don't criticize to the same degree within like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They're overly critical of the other one, DC. But my thing is that as an objective comic book fan, I just want somebody from the mainstream comic. It doesn't matter what company they're with. I just want a solid comic. That's it. Certainly when we talk about those two major companies, in DC and Marvel, those guys have some of the classic characters that we all know and love. We all grew up watching on TV, maybe in certain cartoons, and of course reading the actual comics. They have those. So I want to see them done right. But we live in a day and age where which we've talked about in many different episodes, where the comics have these agendas behind them that are seeming to overshadow just making a good comic, telling a legitimate story, telling a good story, and keeping something to the essence of the character, right? So before I dive into why I think it's important to compare and contrast in this regards, though I don't feel like you have to force that comparison there, let me explain to you what I feel like makes a good comic book and a good comic book line. First and foremost, and to me, I would say probably the most important thing is continuity. Canon, legacy, all of that. But continuity is a very, very important thing when it comes to comics. I think that's what makes comics comics. I want to not only be able to keep up with the character that I want to keep up with, I want those events, no matter where they pop off, even if he shows up in a somebody else's book, which is going to happen, there's going to be a lot of crossover. Even if that happens, I want that to be taken into consideration and have some effect, even if it's minor, on the overarching sort of storyline. That's important to me. That continuity, I do not like it when they change things just for the sake of changing them, or when something is sort of inconsistent in that regards. And this is why I don't like multiverses. I don't like alternate realities. Sometimes they're okay for a little bit of a side story. I get that. But for the most part, I'm against that stuff. Because it allows the writer to be lazy. It just doesn't matter. At that point, it's an alternative universe. You don't have to write anything that fits within the legacy of the character. You don't have to do that. You can just say, hey, this is my canvas. I'm going to write a new story. And in order for this to make sense, it'll just be in an alternative universe, an alternate universe. So continuity is something that's really, really important to me. I want to see those events impacting the others. And that's number one. That's first and foremost. But the story element is obviously important in that regards. It sort of intertwines with the canon and whatnot. But I've mentioned this before. I've done videos on this topic in which I've said that what makes a bad writer, or more so what separates that bad writer from the good one, is that the good writer does not use the character as just their canvas to sort of project their ideological nonsense. That's not what a good writer does. That's not what they do. What they do is they're able to tell good stories, new stories. They can feel fresh, but they can keep it within the legacy of the character. Whereas that character feels like that character, no matter what. Even though, yes, it's a different story being told now, that's still that character. And it feels like that character. This is why a lot of people had issues with Tom King's run with Batman, though I didn't think it was as bad as a lot of people did. But I understand it. Because, yeah, Batman was sort of doing some un-Batman-like stuff. And it didn't feel like Batman sometimes. So the good writer is able to say, hey, this is the character. And this is what goes back to number one. I mean, where people are not caring about continuity or any of that crap, or legacy of character or any of that. Where these writers are simply saying, you know what? I want to tell this story. And I want to implement these sort of social ideas that I have within it. And therefore, the character has to work around that, right? Because I want to tell this story. I have this agenda that I want to tell. And therefore, it makes sense, right? I want female leads, right? So let's just change Jane Foster into Thor. And then turn her into Valkyrie after that. And before that, All Mother of Asgard. Let's just do that, right? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But let's just do that, right? Because I just want that story to be told. It doesn't make sense. And then Thor is telling Odin, oh, I gave her my name. Like, come on, man. They took Thor's nuts. But nonetheless, it's important. The continuity is important, and the storytelling element is important. And I take those two things serious when it comes to me looking for some solid comics. Certainly ones that I'm already familiar with, not new ones. Like that, more so characters that I'm already familiar with. That's one of the first things that I'm paying attention to. Okay, we got a volume 5 of X-Men, or whatever volume we're at. Okay, does this feel like the X-Men? Does Logan feel like Logan? The Cyclops feel like Cyclops? The Storm feel like Storm? And those are things that I'm paying attention to almost immediately. Because if the character early on is doing things that I'm like, well, that doesn't feel right. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute. What? So along with that, the other thing that I look for is some sort of originality. Right? And this more so comes from the fact if you're going to introduce new characters. If you're going to introduce new characters, then make them original. I'm tired of the copies. I'm tired of the 40 versions of the same damn character. I'm tired of all of that. Give me some new original characters, or just continue to expand upon the ones that already exist. If you have an inability to do that, I don't think you should be writing mainstream comics. I'm just being completely honest. If you feel like you have to tokenize a character, or you feel like you have to make just another copy of the same character, certainly now in 2019, current year, if you feel like that's necessary, then I'm here to tell you that you don't know what you're doing. And maybe you should leave that to the people that do. So with that being said, I do think that DC is doing better than Marvel in terms of the comics. We're not talking about film. We're not talking about TV. I'm talking about straight comics. And the reason why I think that comparison is fair, it's not because you just got to pit one against the other. That's not what I'm saying. I'd never do that. Remember, I just mentioned that earlier on the show. It's because what I look for in the comics, DC is doing a better job in, I guess, executing. And what I think is a problem in mainstream comics, though DC is not perfect by any means, they slip up as well. Marvel is dropping the ball way more often. And this is why I say this. Back in the Gap, you used to be able to go to the comic book shop or anywhere where you got your comics. And you used to be able to know exactly what your character was doing, where he was at, what books you were getting, and that was it. You knew. You just knew. Nowadays, you can't even keep up. There's 50 Spider-Man. The lines. I get asked it all the time. I like Spider-Man. I want to get into comics. Where do I start? Good luck. It's Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, Superior Spider-Man, Spider-Man City at War, Life of Spider-Man, Miles Morales Spider-Man, Spider-Man and Deadpool. It was Spider-Man or Spider-Gwen. Silk pops up in the War of the Realms, the New Agents of Atlas. There's too many Spider-Man. There's too many versions of Spider-Man. It's hard to keep up. Now, Superior Spider-Man, which is in the pool list, is actually a different version of. It's not Peter Parker. It gets confusing though because it's called Superior Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man. I didn't mention that as well. And then you got that. Peter has too many going on as well. Between Amazing Spider-Man and the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and it messes up the continuity. Now, I will say that Symbiote Spider-Man, that's another one. You got to pay attention to when some of these events take place because most of them are in the main universe, but there's certain times when they took place. But it's confusing and it's intimidating. It can be intimidating for people that actually read comics, let alone somebody that wants to get into it. So that's where we're at. Marvel Comics is oversaturated with characters nobody cares about and too many versions of the same damn character. The fat needs to get trimmed, and I would argue that the fat needs to get trimmed on both DC and Marvel, but certainly more so Marvel. There's more Marvel lines out right now. So DC has done a better job in the sense that it's easy to keep up with Batman. They'll tell these side stories here and there, but if you compare Batman to Spider-Man, there's not as many. And they've done a great job in sort of separating them, definitely post-Rebirth, in terms of there's not, you got Batman, yeah. But you also have, you got Detective Comics, which is centered around more so the entire Bat family. So you have those. But Batman just has mainly Batman and Batman, the Detective Comics joint. So you have Batman Detective Comics, and that's really it. And you got these other little side stories. You got Batman Who Laughs, and we got some stuff in my pull list that we'll talk about. For the most part, if you keep up with those two lines, you know exactly what's going on with that character. Can't say the same for every Marvel character. I can't. And the problem with Marvel is that they have all these characters, like Squirrel Girl somehow made it to 50 issues. I have no idea how that happened. And then they have stuff like that taking place. They keep trying to force characters by rebooting them, Captain Marvel. And then the good comics that they have with great writers, like Jen and Sylvia Saska sisters, who did the recent run of Black Widow. It was only 5 issues. Limited little series. And that was one of the better comics, at least in my honest opinion, of the year. Period. It's my favorite. So with that being said, they're not expanding on the ones that they should. And then they keep bringing in these unoriginal characters. Goofy ass characters, and then they have these social agendas within them. We got female Thor popping up for whatever reason. All Mother of Asgard Foster, which is goofy as all hell. Get rid of Jane Foster. Good grief. Squirrel Girl, Captain Marvel, things that don't sell. People don't care. I mean, social justice guys may take these little pictures, and you got a reactionary group from the reactionary group, right? You got people that like Captain Marvel out of spite because people that actually read the damn comics aren't really that fond of her. Overshipped ass books. Reboot after reboot in 6 years. Trying to force this character on everybody. So you have that type of stuff taking place. Meanwhile, the ones like Black Widow don't get expanded upon. They get canceled. Now, I don't know why this is the case. I really don't. We can speculate. Maybe there's somebody at the top. I don't know if it has something to do with Disney. Maybe somebody at the top telling them, like, this is where we're going. This is the current year. This is where we're going with our line of comics. This is where we're going. Got to focus on social agendas. Got to turn Iceman gay. That's what it's about. Make Jane Foster all Mother of Asgard. That's what it's about. Have 50 Spider-Men. That's what it's about. And have created these oversaturated ass market with characters nobody cares about. Half of them are copies. And then they don't expand upon. Finally, Brother Voodoo gets some more love. They don't expand upon the ones that exist. It's garbage. Now DC, again, I'm not saying DC is great. I want people to understand that I don't think we're living in the greatest age of comic books. But they're doing a better job. Streamlined. You, for the most part, know exactly what your character is doing throughout the week. Where he's at, where you can find him. Whereas the weekly oversaturated as Marvel with too many characters that nobody gives a rat's butt about. And it creates this, like you go in there on the weekend, you see all these Marvel comics. And then, again, more than half of them are trash. Not interested. And at least DC, post Rebirth, is trying to get back to high issue series, which is what I like. I like that. I like that. Like, if it catches on, it catches on. If it doesn't, cancel them out, leave it alone. Not an immediate reboot. We don't need that. But they're doing a better job. You know, you got the big ones and Batman, Action Comics and Detective Comics, and Superman finally is getting going. I don't know how people feel about it. I actually do know how people feel about it. A lot of people aren't happy about it. But still, you have the other characters like Wonder Woman, Flash. Those guys are, they're getting up there, 70 issues. So I love high issue series. I want to get back to that. I want to get back to high issue series. I'm tired of the reboots. Let's get back to high issue series. Let's trim the fat, Marvel. Marvel, let's trim the fat. Let's get back to telling legitimate stories. Let's get back to original characters. Let's get back to expanding upon the ones that you have, killing off the ones that are trash. Slim things down. Let's trim the fat. That way, when you go in there on a Wednesday at your local comic shop, you can say, give me that, and I'm out. Not that, and I don't even know what the hell's going on. I'm probably never going to read these damn comics. I can't even keep up. It's a damn fool.
Yo, Eric, you nerd. Quit with the mumbo jumbo and talk about some new comics. What's on your pull list for the week?
Okay, on the pull list for the week, man, we got a bunch of interesting stuff. We got Superior Spider-Man. Again, it's funny, I was talking about oversaturated as Spider-Man. This isn't based off Peter Parker. This is based off who you know as Dr. Octopus, who switched his mind with Spider-Man. I'm not going to tell the entire story, but that's what Superior Spider-Man is. So if you're listening to this, like, what the hell is this? That's what's going on. You also have this, and we'll see where this goes. Right? I was talking about DC and what's going to take place in the future, alternative realities, why I don't like it, and all of that stuff. Batman Last Night on Earth. Let's check this out. I haven't read it yet, but that's on it as well. It's another book, which is called Superman, Leviathan Rising. The epic struggle to control the DC universe begins here. So I'll be checking that out as well. We have Daredevil, issue number 6. I'm really liking the Daredevil. Daredevil, in the last issue, if I'm not mistaken, it was 5. Spider-Man told him to hang it up. Spider-Man told his ass he's done. He's slipping. He's been slipping up. He's been reckless. Been fighting police officers, which isn't the worst thing in the world, by the way. But it's the ANCAP in me talking. But nonetheless, it was a really cool scene. He pops up, tells him to hang it up. He got into it with, he got his ass saved by Punisher. It's been pretty good, man. I'm really liking this Daredevil. So check that out. It's going to be issue number 6. We have The Amazing Spider-Man, issue number 22. We have Detective Comics Annual 2, the second annual. So we'll be checking that out. We have Heroes in Crisis, the last book, if I'm not mistaken, in this. So I'll be checking that out. I'm probably going to summarize that. We got Doomsday Clock, issue number 10. We have Thanos, issue number 2. Then we have Black Panther, issue number 12. And there's some that I forgot. I'm just not going to grab them. Those are the main ones. Black Panther, man, I still don't like the whole intergalactic stuff, man, with a Wakanda being at the edge of this dimension or whatever, edge of the universe. It's all funky, man. It's hard to keep up with. But that's where we're at as far as the pull is for the week. Keep it locked over at the YouTube, of course. We're going to be pumping out these videos like crazy. We had a very strong month, very, very strong month of May. I really do appreciate all the supporters. You guys are freaking amazing, man. That stream that we did the other day on the 31st, man, it was nuts. Last day, that was a way to pop off the month, was it not? Donation wars, people going crazy. It's been nuts, man. So I do appreciate all of you guys. And we're going to keep rocking. That's how we do.
That's going to do it for today's episode of For Canon's Sake with Eric July. Be sure to keep it locked for the best mix of comics and political commentary you'll ever hear. And I mean ever hear. To get caught up or to contact the show, be sure to visit forcanonsake.com.